Good evening to one and all present here. I, Deepmala Jasuja, welcome you all on behalf of AGBS Noida for the webinar Impact of COVID on the Auto Industry and Recovery Scenario, the Short-Term and the Long-Term Impact. I am delighted to share that today we have with us Mr. Gautam Pandey, Chief Finance Officer, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles India, to deliver his insights on the topic Impact of COVID on Auto Sector. Mr. Gautam Pandey is a business leader with close to 2 decades of experience in finance and corporate strategy in automotive and power sector. A doer and a thinker with proven track record, Mr. Pandey has a good experience in building high performance teams and is an expert in cross-cultural partnering. Prior to FCA, he was associated with the premier brands like Nissan, Ford Motor Company and Tata also. With in-depth expertise in finance and a robust understanding of strategic business aspects, Mr. Pandey has worked successfully on devising operational and strategic solutions for complex business issues. Mr. Gautam is no way from academics also. He had keeping keen interest in the academics and he was the ex-faculty at ICWAI. He was also the speaker in prestigious forums including Department of Management Studies, IIT Delhi, PwC webinar, etc. He is an alumni of IAFT Delhi, Masters in Commerce from Ranchi University, and also the member of ICWA. We are delighted to host you, sir. Over to you, sir, for insights.
Thank you, ma'am, and a very good afternoon to all of us. And it is indeed a pleasure to be here amongst the prestigious, faculty of Amity and also with the students. So before I start the session, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude and thanks to the team from Amity, especially Dr. Greece Kathuria, Professor Sudhir Pasricha, and Dr. Das Gupta for inviting me for the session. So with that, I would like to go to this topic straightforward. I think the team, the students would be waiting keenly for the topic. So we are getting on a topic on the COVID. So I think in the last couple of months, if something is being heard, it's the COVID all around. Keeping that into mind, I would like to just go into some more background to give on the automotive side. And then I would come on the topics of the COVID. So let me share my screen. All right, so please let me know if you all can see my screen here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So as we start the presentation, couple of caveats from the policy standpoint. This presentation would be completely on my own capacity as an individual, and it is not to be linked with the FCA as a standard disclaimer what we maintain. And today, from the content standpoint, I'm going to focus upon the passenger vehicles business. So in the automotive is again a broad topic, and within the automotive, we have got the two major verticals which we call. One is the passenger vehicles, and second is the commercial vehicles. So most of the time when you hear about the automotive, you hear about the passenger vehicles. Of course, in many of the time we do talk about the commercial vehicle, the three-wheelers, the two-wheelers, etc. So today's focus with my own expertise in this industry, I would like to give some more insights to the students and participants on the passenger vehicle business. And for that purpose, for the academic purpose, I would exclude my references with the commercial vehicles and the three-wheeler industry also. Let's go on to the first topic now, and as we go on the topics, couple of areas, core which I would like to focus upon today. To start with the introduction of the automotive sector, and I would consider that the participants here would be keen to understand the nitty-gritties of the industry and some more insights. So I just try to touch upon some of the fundamentals, some of the basic references, some key data points, so that we can appreciate the current circumstances. And then we'll come on the current industry. And when I say current industry, I'm referring to the last 5 years, wherein 14 through 19, but for the current phase of turmoil is taken away. And I'll talk about the industry evolution in the last 5 years. And the theme is that the takeoff in a stormy weather. So you will get to know more as I go along with the presentation. Then I'll come on the COVID side. So how the industry is sailing through, and I say it as a hurricane, the way it came, and it was unprecedented, unheard of. So we'll talk about it a little bit more. And I know that there will be some of the questions also coming in this area. So we'll go through that. And towards the end, I'll just briefly touch upon, from the student's perspective, what in this situation and in this environment, what it is lying for the students. So that's the key topics which I'm planning to cover with the participants here. With this, let me go to the next slide. And here we are talking about the automotive sector. And when we are coming to any sector, we need to see in a perspective. So again, automotive sector being one of the core sector into the industrial side, looks into the major parameters from the industry and from the country. So you would have seen that a lot of entrants are coming into the industry. The sector is getting denser. A lot more launches are happening. But now, why those things are happening has to be seen in a perspective. So I would start with the GDP. I know it is the learned group here, so I would not go into nitty-gritties, but most of you know that how our GDP has been faring. And this chart talks about into the historical backdrop. So when you see some of the chart which I'll be drawing into the inference into this section, it would primarily be into consideration of the historical backdrop. So how the experts and how the global investors and how the regulators and various stakeholders used to see this sector just 2-3 years back. So the picture which I'm trying to show you here is dated 2018 estimation and based upon the ABM report. And we were estimating that the country is going at a very fast GDP, which indeed it is going through. It was surpassing China. And amongst the other emerging major economies, Brazil and Russia, it was also surpassing the same. So we had a pretty steady 6% plus GDP growth rate, and that was continuing to a pretty decent rate. Now with this, if you see, we are the 7th largest country, if you look into from area perspective. So 3.3 million square kilometers. And it's not just the area. If you see the right hand side of the same chart, and why this chart is here, there's a reason behind it. So though the area is on the 7th largest from the country size standpoint, but when you see the size and geographically, it is many countries within a country. And this becomes true when you look into the consumer profiling and when you go into the micro markets and try to analyze the market and various positioning aspects. And therefore, it becomes very important for us to understand that we are talking about a country which represents quite densely from the population standpoint. We are 6th largest economy by nominal GDP, 2.61 trillion, and the 3rd largest purchasing power parity, and was standing at 9.45 trillion US dollars. Last but not the least, very important from the demography standpoint, we are 2nd highest population after China, 1.3 billion official number, and we are expecting to surpass China by 2030, becoming the most populous country in the world. So these are some of the macro picture which we got to keep into mind while we are zooming in now to the automotive sector. With this background, I'd like to go into introducing the automotive sector. So this slide is just trying to bring in some of the key inference and the perspective in which we see the automotive industry. Let's start with the GDP again, since we spoke about GDP. So 7.1% of the GDP, national overall GDP, all across comes from the automotive sector. 8% of the country's research and development expenditure goes into automotive sector. So this sector is quite progressive, keeps building up the new technologies, new ways to cope up to the market demand, and also, the fuel efficiency and several other factors. So it's very important to keep into mind. Also from the futuristic perspective, generally those sectors who spends higher on the R&D are very forward-looking sectors. When you come to the industrial GDP, almost 27% of the industrial GDP comes from automotive business. 27%, which is a big number. And therefore, when you talk about the industry, you talk about a lot about the automotive industry from the industrial perspective. The 4.3% share of the export, And there is a constant endeavor of the government of India and to pursue it towards the export. So there's a lot of push happening in this area. So this ratio or this percentage is expected to grow in the future and times to come. Then we are coming to the what is the vehicles we sold. So again, I'm talking about the passenger vehicle here. It's not the total vehicle which the industry sold, which was about 3.8 million. So, but if you talk about only passenger vehicle, it was 3.1 million, about 31 lakhs vehicles which were sold in 2019. In terms of export, in terms of the value, it was 11.3 billion in 2019, and this sector employs directly or indirectly about 35 million people. So if you see the industrial employment, the automotive sector emerges to be the biggest employer into the industrial space. Now, from the FDI perspective, the 5% of the total foreign direct investment are coming to automotive sector, and it continues to grow. It is not stopping. Besides a lot many challenges, there had been instances where some of the news was that a couple of OEMs went back, vacated the market, but more than that, many other OEMs are entering to the market. Therefore, there's a constant flow of the foreign direct investment into this sector. Coming from the investment in mass, so 24.2 billion US dollars was the investment this sector has seen in the last 20 years. So from 2000 to 2020, about 24.2 billion dollars of the investment came. And the sector on an annual basis are delivering a turnover of 85.6 billion US dollars. So that's some of the key points which we got to keep into mind while we are talking about the industry here. Let me move to the next picture from here, and I'll now go in terms of dissecting and giving you some of the different elements of the industry. So we spoke about the macro perspective, we spoke about the overall broad perspective in which we see the industry. Now let's talk about some of the detailing of it. So what the industry lies, where the industry is, and what is the characteristics of the investment industry. And let's talk in particular about the passenger vehicles. So India is a very unique in terms of the classification and segmentation of the vehicle. Why so? Because there's a reasons I'll unfold into the following slides. But this chart would tell us that the gray highlighted is about 75% of the overall market, and this 75% comes from sub 4 meter. So those who are interested into vehicles would know that there's a lot more differentiations when the product comes into sub 4 meter and more than 4 meters, mainly because there is a Texas slabs which attached to it, and therefore there's a heavy skewness towards the sub 4 meter. And within this segment, when you see, you will find that the majority of the vehicles which is coming through would be into the HB vehicles and sedan vehicles, and then to some extent it comes into utility vehicles also. So these are the segmentations which you can see into dissection of the graph here. When you go to the more than 4 meters, you will see the graph declines sharply, and you will not find something between 4 meters to 4.1, because obviously there's no incentive to be in this space. And then this is the space where naturally the world lies into. So if you keep aside the India, if you go to anywhere across the world, you will not see this level of classification, therefore the skewness of the vehicles in terms of sizes. So this is one more uniqueness which comes. And as the market matures and the GDP grows, the vehicle populations in the emerging markets or in the growing markets increases into this area, because the average price also changes when you increase the size and the segmentation of the vehicle. So we got to keep this piece also into our mind when we go talking about the automotive industry. Moving on, directly linked to what I showed in the previous slide is the tax classifications. So the goods and services tax. So of course the vehicle is impacted by the GST, the import duty, and the local taxes. So there are 3 taxes which is impacted. I'm going to talk about the first element now, and in one of the slides I'll touch upon the rest of the element also. I'll not touch in this presentation the import piece. That would become too much for a 1-hour session, but let me touch upon the GST piece. So as you saw in the previous chart, there's a sub 4 meter of the classification, and there's above 4 meter of classification. You clearly see that the tax rates of the GST applies to 31% and 29%, except for the petrol, where the engine size is more than 1.5 liter, 1.2 liter to 1.5 liter. And then you go into the above 4 meter, and there the tax rates are going to 45% plus. So there's significant jump, And the vehicles what you saw in the previous slide, this slide, all the vehicles would belong to 29% or 31% GST rates, because then the OEM would not place the vehicle in a smaller vessel segment. Then the OEM will place the vehicles into the higher segment, which is suffering much higher taxes. The other topics which you must be hearing about, the electric vehicles. So we commonly call it as a BEV, so battery operated electric vehicle, what you see down below. And then there is called mild HEV, mild hybrid electric vehicle, full hybrid electric vehicle, and PHEV and EREV. So let me not go into these three, because currently the government of India is promoting to the BEV, which is the battery electric vehicle, and therefore you will see there is very aggressive GST rate being offered, which is to the tune of 5% to promote the electrification of the industry. This is again unlike the rest of the world. In most of the markets, you will see that the mild hybrid and the hybrid is being promoted very aggressively, which is not happening right now in India. But again, that's a policy matter, and there's pros and cons behind that. So I'll not go into pros and cons. That's not the topic for today. But as long as knowing the industry is concerned, this is a very important piece we got to keep into mind, because eventually this impacts many other elements of the overall value chain. All right, so moving on, let me go to the passenger vehicles again, into giving you one more dissection. So you know that the diesel as a fuel was a favorite fuel for the vehicle operators, because of the two reasons. One, that it gives definitely a better mileage. So per liter, the running is generally higher on the diesel operated vehicle, and on the petrol it's lower, generally 30%. And the prices used to be quite different for the diesel and petrol, mainly because the government used to cross subsidize diesel fuel, considering that it has got wider implications into agriculture and the industrial sector. But of late, government has came across out of that policy, and the prices are now setting free for the market factors. Therefore, in this chart, you will see there is a significant change happening into the fuel mix. Now, what these charts are, so you can see that the blocking is done based upon the fuel type. So the gray one, the bottom one is the gasoline, which is the petrol. The next one used to be the diesel, and then it is coming to the electric vehicles. So I think I said it the other way around. So let me rephrase. So this is the diesel, the bottom one. Then after coming the gasoline, and then after the electric vehicles coming. So you can see, standing on 2019, which is the actual data, it was again, since the market factors was playing a role, and petrol vehicles was now getting more popular, the petrol vehicle, the diesel vehicle was getting less popular. And as the time passes through, an industry expects that eventually the diesel vehicle will get less and less popular, and the petrol vehicle will continue to dominate. And in the convergence, you will see that electric vehicle is also coming into picture. And in a couple of years from now, we are expecting that about 20-25% would be operated from electric vehicle side. So if you see 21.7 and the rest 3, you would see good 30% is being expected. The industry would move towards electric vehicles in the 5 years time from now. So this is an important factor which comes through, and comes from the IHS, which is one of the global forecasting agency. Moving on to the next. So with these two factors, and again I'm going back on the two other topic which I stated. One, the size of the vehicle. Second, the taxes of the vehicle, and these factors heavily influence the buying decision of the consumers. Therefore, this chart, which is the bottom of the chart, talks about the price range in the Indian rupees, and on the top it talks about the sales in those segments into thousands. And you see that the sales are highly skewed in the sub 10 lakhs. And why sub 10 lakhs? Because of the two reasons. One, that the tax factor is playing a role here, as you can see. And second, many of the states are following a price-based road tax and registration tax policies. And in most of the cases, there is a significant tax differences higher than the 10 lakh rupees. Therefore, you will see there is a significant change and significant skewness coming through the price band below 10 lakh vehicles. And hence, the industry literally operates into two broad buckets. One is the sub 10 lakhs and second is the higher than the 10 lakhs. And currently, though the industry is evolving towards the higher and richer mix in terms of price point, but this space is still not as dense as the space below 10 lakhs are. With this factor, let's talk a bit about our populations and the demography, though we spoke a bit earlier. So if you see the convergence which is happening through 15, 20, 25, and 30, and this is based upon the Euromonitor survey which was conducted in 2017, you would see that the aging classification is very important here. And why aging classifications? Because the purchasing and purchase decisions and the consumer behavior is heavily influenced by these two segments, what you see in the middle one, the green one and the red one. And you could see that the dominance of these two sectors, these two subsections of the populations are becoming more and more evident. And as of now, as we are speaking right now, about 58% of the populations is into this productive range. And this not only influences the average per capita income, the disposable income, but it also depends and indicates a lot on the buying decisions and the complexities around the customer expectations. Some of the points I will touch upon into the following slide. The key takeaways again, that we are the third largest in terms of the populations and the younger populations. 71% of e-commerce market share with online travel in 2017. Very important because the dominance of the people into the block which you see in the middle one is growing. 16% e-commerce market share with e-tailing in 2017, and about 200% growth in the auto-related online searches. So as we are converging into a more mature market, the industry is also converging from the conventional industry to a digital savvy industry. Okay, so with this, let me move on to the next section, and I hope this section gives you some of the dissections and some of the perspective of the industry. While it is not adequate time to give a proper deeper insight, but I just try to touch upon some of the key dimensions of the industry to have a better understanding of the overall automotive industry. So with this, let me move on to the next section, which is the phase, which is a recent phase, the last 5 years, 14 through 19. And why I call it as a takeoff in the stormy weather, it's you get to know towards the end of the section. Again, starting with the GDP. So we are quite dominant. I'm just taking a link from what we explained to you all. Then let's link it with the what and where our economy lies. So at one place, the economy is growing at a very fast pace. On the other hand, our vehicle penetration is one of the lowest in the world amongst the comparable economies. The closest reference would be China. And if you look into the 16 data as a reference for China and India, there is a gap as high as 6 to 7 times in terms of the penetration of the vehicle for India and for China. When you talk about the other emerging market, and for the known purpose, I have not kept here the North America and other advanced market. I had kept the major emerging markets, which is the Russia, Brazil, South Africa, and China. You see that we have got a huge potential in terms of the the penetration and the number of vehicles per 1,000 inhabitants. And therefore, when the economy is growing, the per capita incomes are growing. Obviously, the demand would not grow in an organic manner, but demand would grow on an inorganic manner. Now, why so? Let's talk about this in this slide. So in 2015, when you look into the slide, in 2015, this was the addressable populations from the industry standpoint. Now let's talk a little bit more about the slide. So the chart what you see on the left hand side, this talks about the various sub-classification of the populations, and those populations are being then concentrated and classified with the income ranges. So on the blue bars are representing the income ranges, the per capita income in the $1,000. So starting with and on the right hand side, you see what is the situation we have currently. So here on the adverse order, you have got a high net worth individuals whose income is $250,000 currently, and we expect the same to grow by about 50%, taking about $334,000. But the key is not this one. Key is the bottom one. So what is happening that automotive industry gets a demand from the consumers when the per capita income reaches to a flex point of about 3,000 US dollars, which you can see here. So vehicle accessibility empirically is established that when the income is crossing or reaching to close to 3,000 US dollars, that is the time when the vehicle demand kicks in. Then that is the time when the people generally have the demand for the vehicle. As of now, sitting in 2015, we were having this block, which was addressable populations having income closer to 3,000 dollars, even not $3,000, but we had taken for the previous purpose $2,500 because we play into a low segment also in India, and that used to be 156 million population. Now the same 156 million population grows to 324 million population when it goes into 2020. Now again, this reference and research was a couple of years back, 2 years back, and this was based upon the, the source was Labor Bureau and Government of India's details, and Goldman Sachs some research data. And this says that the populations would be growing, the addressable population from industry standpoint would grow almost double, more than double in a 5 years time. Therefore, will bring an exponential growth potential at a CAGR of more than 10% into this period. And this is being clarified from this demand estimation. And when you club this with the previous chart, which was talking about the number of vehicles per inhabitants, and when you club this with the growth projections of the GDP, then you see that you have got a very solid demand which will come in the future. And that was the reason why most of the global OEMs, the big global OEMs, were looking at India as the next hub to, to grow their market and the presence. Now, talking about these two data points, let me go into the some different context here and some other macroeconomic, socioeconomic factors here. So it's not about vehicles. So all along we had been talking about the vehicles and the population, but now let's talk about how this ecosystem is helping to build up the wider ecosystem. And now we are talking about the mobility. So let me introduce a term of mobility here, which is not only the vehicle and the movement of the people, but it is beyond that. It is beyond that how the value system is being created around the mobility. And hence the two different broad pictures comes into what are the product centric mobility solutions coming through. And this chart would give you that various different aspects in which the mobility is coming into picture. Starting with the ride sharing, you all would know about the Ola, Uber, Meru cabs. So these all are the ride hailing. Then comes to the ride sharing, which is the Uber Pool, Ola Share. Many of you would recognize this is an emergence of the last 2-3 years. It was not present earlier. Then the car sharing is a new business vertical which is emerging, and a couple of brands you generally see is the BlaBlaCar, Ideally, Pool My Car, etc. And then bike sharing model also came up into existence, which is the Uber Moto, Bexy, so on and so forth. And then the fleet management system came into picture. Tata entered into the same also from the big brand perspective. There are a couple of other partners which you will see. And finally, when you go on the value added and infrastructure sector, you will see the multiple different dimensions are coming into picture also. Let's spend a minute more on this particular seat, because I want the students in particular to get a more sense from the mobility, because I'll talk about this in my conclusion slide. Don't see automotive just as a vehicle, as a mode of transportation. It is much more beyond. It is one of the essential tool for the humanity to perform their operations. And therefore, there's a huge ecosystem which is around. And therefore, this offers a lot more to do in the whole space. And therefore, you will see a lot of startups are venturing out into this space. Now, when you talk about the infrastructure, from the product-centric approach to infrastructure, then you will have multi-modal solutions mapping. Of course, Google Map, you all know, but Google Map as one of the major lead generator, I don't know how many of us would appreciate that factor, but this is one of the major lead generating factors and one of the major revenue generator for Google worldwide. And therefore, in the mapping solutions, you will have Move It, Map In, Apple is trying hard to get into this space, and many of the smaller players within this products are coming into this picture. Then we comes into connected car. Connected is one of the major disruption which industry is facing, and almost all OEMs are working very hard on this area. Some of the big name which is within this space is the Herman, Car IQ, Bosch, Visteon, and there are many other players which is working in this place. And across the globe, if you look into the startups, you'll find hundreds of startups working into the connected car and connected platforms. Then comes into on-demand delivery. Now I'll talk about Swiggy. Swiggy and Zomato, Food Panda, you would know mainly from the perspective of ordering a food. But this is beyond that. What these players are doing, they are clubbing the mobility with the value chain. So they are creating a unique value propositions by clubbing the need of the restaurant owners, the consumers who wants the fresh and hot food, along with the the aggregating platform, and that is being supported with the state-of-the-art mobility platform which these guys are using, and then clubbing the whole value and ecosystem. It grows further into the smart parking. There's a couple of players coming into it, more growing further. There are very innovative solutions coming across the globe. In India also, some of them are getting popular, but when you see into other evolved markets, you will see much more dominance and much more activity happening into smart parking solutions. Coming to the clean technology, electrifications, this is again a buzzword nowadays. So besides on the vehicle side, from the emission norms perspective, a lot of things are happening, but from the multiple other dimensions like battery technology, lithium ion is everybody knows. There's a lot of research happening onto the hydrogen fuel and many other non-conventional and conventional ways to optimize the fuel need for the sector. So again, a big area and big industry in itself. And finally, the autonomous vehicles and the self-driving vehicle, which is again a big research which it's happening through. If you look into all the movies, the science fiction movies, you will find that autonomous vehicle is almost everywhere there. And if you look into the trend of the previous science fiction movies which would have came 30 or 40 years before, those things which we see 3 or 4 decades before comes into existence a couple of decades down the line. So don't think that autonomous driving is very far. A lot of strong research is happening. It will take some time to make it to the commercial usage and bring the scalability of taking the overall cost of operations. But the technology is there. It is getting evolved. It is working very smoothly, and as a generation by generation, right now it's moving to the next generations. And the research on this area is happening not now, but since last 10 years almost. So this gives you the broad perspective of the overall ecosystem in which the mobility has to be seen. Now I'm using the term again, mobility, in terms of automotive industry, because I want the audience here to recognize and register this word very, very clearly as one of the key takeaways. Now moving on. Now I'm again changing a gear here. So I told you that we were very bullish, and let me recap what I had been telling so far. I told you that India GDP was growing very fast. We were anticipating that our per capita or per thousand vehicle penetration is very, very low, and we have got huge potential there because we see the population's average income is changing, and therefore the more people are coming into the addressable population for the industry, and there's huge growth happening in the overall ecosystem. So overall, all these things were leading to an estimation wherein the researchers and the experts was considering the India, which is already at a number 4 position in the globe. It used to shuffle between the 4 and 5, between us and Germany, but India had been into the top 5 since last several years. And it was expected that India would jump to 3rd position in terms of the TIV, total industry volume, in 1,000 units, by 2021. Now with the COVID, lot many estimations will change, lot many reset button is being pressed into. So we'll talk about that later. But if you look into the industry, into the historical perspective, and also the recent perspective from the strategic angle, this is where the global strategist and the automotive experts used to see India at. Moving on to the next slide. And so this was all so far. So we were riding fast. We took off. To me, we took off, and therefore we are in the top 5, OEM in the world. And we were doing reasonably fine. There was a healthy growth in the industry. The industry was going to the tune of 7 to 8% on an average every year, except for some exceptions, some segment exceptions. But the fairy tale story did not continue as ever, and the turmoil came in. So turmoil came in, and this chart I just put into from the DIV again data standpoint. Let's look into the data from again the historical perspective. And here I'm not talking about the absolute number. You can see the absolute number up until FY18 H1 here, just to put the number in perspective. And all these numbers are into thousand. So you can see this number like 38 lakhs, 54,000 used to be the number, actual number for FY17. We were growing at a steady pace of 4.8, 7.2, 9.5, so on and so forth. So there was healthy growth happening from 14 through FY18 first half. Okay, that is when many changes came into the industry, and then you see a sudden decline started to come up. Now I won't quote some of the controversial topic like demonetizations, GST, so on and so forth, BS6 regulations, but due to whatever factors coming into things, and I'll touch upon some of the key specific factors which I showed into the following slide. But this chart will tell you that the growth story continues, but then the turmoil hits in, and the bad weather cuts in, and the growth goes into negative territory. And this started from not recently in the COVID tenure, but it dates back to 1.5 or 2 years back, starting from November 18, wherein the growth went into negative territory, and it continued. And I'm leaving this slide at April 18, where the decline was the sharpest. Now, why? That would be the very obvious and clear question. So let me go on that questions here. So some of the questions I would like to give you in the perspective. So started with the NBFC and the banking crisis happened, so which has impact. So NBFC reduced the lending, and there was a couple of non-banking financial services issues most of us would know, the ILFS issues. But when you go into detailing, you will find a lot of many issues came into the banking sector, and therefore liquidity became one of the major concerns to start with. And the funding rate grew very significantly around the same time. So that came as a retail funding perspective. And then on the wholesale side, the bankers and the funders started to tighten the norm. And when I'm saying wholesale side, I mean the dealers funding, because dealers are the very key and elementary in the whole value chain of the automotive industry. And they faced a lot of issues in terms of the working capital and keeping up the momentum. And in this phase, many of the dealers also got busted, the NPAs got declared, and therefore the bankers took the more conservative view, and therefore it took some time to strengthen the whole sector. So this was mainly from the financial side or banking side. The other factor other than the banking, which is also important for us to understand, and let's get into a couple of them. So the change which happened noticeably was dip into the rural demand around the same time when I'm referring to. Highest interest rate we already touched upon. Oil prices continue to increase. There was constant tax which was also being revisited on that, and then general elections held in April and May, which also led into reduction of the liquidity, because generally during the elections the liquidity gets diverted into several other factors, and overall the industry saw into a quite significant reduction in terms of demand. Now what it happened, because of the slowness of the demand, the dealers and the supply chain and the value chain started to have very high level of inventory, 60, 70 days. And the cost of maintaining business was very, very high. This was again going into a bad vicious spiral, and the industry was suffering again because of that. And since the industry gone into distress, the dealers started to put into discounting. Many of you would have seen a very high and crazy discount, and that led into destruction into the value chain and the margin structure, and also led into obsolescence risk because of regulations, because around the same time, many automotive regulations came into picture, which was leading to frequent product changes. And overall, the dealers' profitability and the industry profitability came into huge stress. And this was not in the COVID, it was before the COVID. And this was the factor which was not specifically impacting to one OEM, but to many other OEMs. Now let me come to the regulatory framework. So automotive is again a very heavily regulated sector. So when I say regulations, I mainly talk about the vehicle safety and environmental regulations, and there are several of the regulations which is impacting here. And if I talk about very specifically last 2 years, and I would like to link with my previous slide here, the key safety and quality regulations which our regulators had been focusing upon to bring in the safety and the the quality of the vehicle. And while it was very good and welcome move, it increased the average price of the vehicle, and therefore the affordability of the customers was becoming an issue, and that also led into a decline in the demand in the marketplace. So as a conclusion here, while it helped in overall quality of the vehicle, cost, especially for entry segment, increased because most of these regulations were impacting the entry segment, A and B segment vehicles, which was driving a lot of demand, and those vehicles saw a lot of challenges into this time. Now, when we came to the last year, which is 2019 and 2020 April, to be specific, because April was the cutoff for the BS4 to BS6 MSM norms, and it was one of the unique in the world wherein the country directly moved from BS4 to BS6. Of course, there was a mandate from Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court of India, so it was supposed to be done, but the way through which the whole transition happens was very, very tough, because the mandate was to retail all the vehicles on or before 30th of March. And that led into a lot of destruction, because the entire value chain and supply chain in terms of the finished vehicle has to be vacated and cleansed up before 31st of March. And therefore, there was a huge amount of destructions happens around that time. And coincidentally, April was the month when the changeover was happening. And that was the month which was immediate next month after the BS4 to BS6 migration. And this impacted significant amount of destructions around the industry. And that also impacted industry in a order way. This slide is a bit busy slide, and I borrowed from somewhere just to give you some glimpse of the perspective here. So I gave you that. Now I'm trying to talk about the challenges side and why industry is right now finding some of the trouble here. So of course I spoke about some of the elements, and right now I'm focusing pre-COVID. I'm not yet gone to the COVID yet, and I'm mindful about my time now. So what is happening? I already gave you a glimpse of what the tax rate, GST rates applies here. So you can see the various subcategories of vehicles are facing taxes starting from 29% to up to 50%. Then it comes about the steep road tax and the registration tax, which goes up to 20% in many of the cases. Okay, so when you look into some of the popular cars, the vehicle suffer a very significant amount of the taxes when it reaches to the end customer percent, and that is something which is also a factor which is impacting the demand in the medium term, while the other factors are continuing. Now with this, where are we standing? Okay, so far we spoke about that there was a lot of challenges, and then industry came into a decline negative mode. But at the same time, it was not like that the fundamental factors of the industry was not strong and not robust. And there was a long-term physicals which was still supporting to the industry. Therefore, it was important for us to understand in this environment. And now I'm talking about environment of 2019, what was existing, what was the consumers, and what was the changing term. So these are the two slides I would like to talk briefly about it. This is a detailed topic, but I'll touch upon the brief of some of the key elements. So this is the consumers' expectations in India. And I'm talking to you based upon some of the research data, what are the key consumer trends in India. And while there was macroeconomic factors, socioeconomic factors, which is pushing the vehicle and the industry on the upper side, it is also one of the most challenging sector to sustain, operates at a very, very thin margin. Why? Because this is the place where the customers are one of the hard, it is very hardest to please. They're very brand conscious. They want to be associated with a good brand. They would like to be influenced with the social element. So you got to be maintaining your brand presence. People would like to travel across the places. So it's not like that somebody who's living into villages would not be privy to see the other vehicles or the good brands. Consumers know it all and also wants to have it all. So people want everything, but don't want to spend the money towards that. But that is one of the common trend what we see here. And the customization is again coming as a new way. Therefore, you will see the majority of the sales of most of the vehicle would happen on the top 10, because people would like to be very creative, very customized while they are buying the vehicle. And having all these things 1 to 5, still the customers are very value seeking. So if you don't give them the value of their money, they won't stick to you. So whatever you do in all the previous things, you got to check your cost, and you got to check your overall value chain. Therefore, the overall value seekingness is very, very important here. And finally, consumers are looking forward for product which is promoting the healthy living, knowing that the demography which I shared with you, the healthy population, the young populations are coming in, the trend which is emerging strong and strong on the healthy living. Couple of key trends on the mobility are from the Indian consumer side, I touched upon already, but mobility as a service, because don't consider it's only as a vehicle, it's a mobility as a service. So we got to see into broad spectrum of the mobility, not only as a vehicle sales. That's one of the key element. Then coming as a smart cities, so government is promoting, we all know, and therefore the convergence of the mobility is coming in different way. So there's strong focus on having smaller cities so that the distance can be cut down. But yet the comfort and the other factors of the vehicle has to be taken into consideration. Very smart focus on the digitization. Therefore, the connected vehicles, the data-driven approach is very, very important. We got to keep into mind. And finally, electric mobility is going to be coming soon, sooner than the ever. It's not going to be like it's next year, but it is going to come. I also touched upon this point into one of my previous slides. So with this, I would like to conclude the session, giving you the details insight of the automotive sector and coming just before the COVID crisis. Now, where it leads us to. So let's talk about the COVID crisis and how we had been sailing through this hurricane. Now, this chart. So before COVID, I'm sure you would have heard some of the other speakers, and there were a lot of research going on that what kind of recovery India will see. And one of the best recovery the world sees is the V-shape. Now, I want you to concentrate on the yellow line here, and the gray line, what you see is the last year's data, just to put things into perspective. So gray line would be representing the FY19 actual data, and the yellow line would be representing the 2020 actual data. So when we reached in the month of April, there was sudden decline in the demand. In fact, it went to zero, which was unprecedented for the first time. And then May was the first month where the industry got open for about 10 days. And then following month followed the recovery. And you will see that the recovery is broadly following the V-shaped recovery. So while the experts were skeptical about the fast recovery, automotive industry demonstrated a very quick and V-shaped recovery. And now what is key is to find it as a sustained recovery. Though while the industry recovered, the entry segment saw a much stronger recovery than the higher end vehicles. Obviously, because there is a conservatism still lying in the minds of the consumers. Let's quickly go through a couple of other points. So how these phases, I am touching upon here 5 phases, right? You can see here phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 phases. Let's talk about that. These are nothing but the months. Starting from April. So it was the first month where we, where all ever since we have this industry in existence was the first zero sales month. Okay. So again, it was a catastrophe month. We could not do anything. It was a mandate which everybody followed. Phase 2 came when the industry reached to 15% of the last year. That was the phase 2. And passenger vehicle was 37K as against 240K in the previous year. The next phase came. And in this phase, if you see, the challenge was mainly how to unlock the dealerships, how to connect to the customers. Even if somebody want to buy a vehicle, how to give the vehicle to them. And then the third phase came in the month of June, wherein the industry strongly bounced back. So from 37K, from 0 to 37K, from 37K to 118K. So the industry reached as much as 52% of the previous year number, and there was quite a strong recovery. The following month was even stronger. The industry reached to 98%. And finally, the last month, which is the recent most month, was 118% of the previous year. So far, the automotive industry, besides a lot of challenges on the supply chain side and a lot of challenges on the several other sides, was able to reach back to the previous year level, slightly better than that. Experts right now anticipate this is a pent-up demand because right now people don't have trust on and confidence on the public mobility. So people are buying more from the safety concerns. So we got to see whether this is a sustained demand or it's a short-term or contemporary recovery. Moving on to how industry sail through. So I'll just touch upon some of the brief factors from little bit from the industry insider perspective. So any crisis teaches you a lot many things. Interestingly, for automotive industry, all the major economic crisis or economic slowdown has brought into a sustainment challenges, be it 1930s challenges or 2018's challenges, and prior to the 2008 challenges. So key in this phase, because this was the unprecedented time where you don't have any revenue coming through for a long time. So it was a cash is king. We got to keep the industry afloated. This is industry which is very, very capital intensive, very, very cash incentive. And the, the cost structure is not flexible because you operate with the plant and equipments. You don't have a flexible cost structure. So the key focus for us and for as industry was cash is king, preserve the cash and create liquidity avenues to remain sustainable. And then identify quick cash generations and saving opportunities, take whatever the force majeure activity we got to take, protect customers and the revenue was another big focus, identify new ways to reach customers and find new opportunities, besides the challenges continued, recover operational and resume planned growth trajectory for a period, and safeguard employee welfare, communicate, create a resilient organizations, because we got to reach to customers, we got to sustain the whole thing, but at the same time, we got to keep our people along and motivated. And finally, stress test for IT infrastructure, because we had been working from home and there were a lot of safety issues, there were a lot of IT security issues. We got to keep business continuity up and running. It was again unprecedented challenge which the industry has been able to sail through. And finally, which is very important, manage operational productivity and strengthen supply chain. So these were some of the major factors which most of the industry has been focusing upon to sail through this pandemic challenge. Coming to the key factors which is impacting sustained recovery, because I touched upon in one of the slide before previous, how we see as a sustained recovery. So from the industry perspective and from our perspective, we see that preference for personal transport will be key driver, how consumer perceives as a personal transportation. Used vehicle market would be also very key element because of two reasons. One is that it will bring in the new set of customers, and those customers who are selling the vehicles, they will be replacing their vehicle. Government policies are also coming to support that. Government is coming up with a scrapping policy already announced. There is a industry has been asking for some tax relief. It depends how it comes or not. So far, it doesn't look like coming in. Shared mobility, evolutions of the coming preferences will also be key. How the people perceive and continue to see the shared mobility, which was very emerging and strong trend in the Indian automotive industry. And then finally, the consumers are also seeing a likely segment downgrading, because somebody who was willing to spend, let's say, 20 lakh rupees would now not be willing to spend 20 lakh rupees, but say 10 or 15 lakh rupees. So that is also coming out as a new trend, which we are watching mindfully. And then new ways of reaching customers, digital targeted reach, consumer confidence and liquidity, and finally adopting to change in the consumer expectations. So these are some of the key elements which is important. Last but very important is the consumer expectations and how it is changing. So let's talk a bit more about that. Here we are talking about the consumer preferences. So when you see 56% of the people makes better financial sense to keep their own current vehicle, and 28% do not see any requirement for a vehicle for themselves. So this research is very recent research, and this comes from the GT, Grant Thornton's Auto Research, Q1 2021. So you will see some of the key data point, which talks about that consumers are still not very confident, and the consumer confidence is not very at high level, wherein you can see very sustained and pent up demand. But we got to watch this space very, very carefully. When you talk about the drivers for the new vehicle purpose, 57% say they would buy a new vehicle to avoid use of public transport. 40% says that they would buy a new vehicle to upgrade from their existing vehicle. So this is still very, very important for us, because replacement is one of the key motive for which to continue to have the demand. 20% of the people want to buy the own vehicle for the first time. So this is very important. It was not used to be so dominant earlier, which is coming in now, probably because of the safety concerns coming through. So these are the factors which is supporting the industry. While the factors what you see on the top, like 57% people are into the financial sense not to invest further on the vehicle is very, very important. And the way to reach the customer, 68% are okay to reach with the conventional way, and remaining don't want to go and get in touch with the people contact to buy a vehicle. So this connects to the last leg of the consumer behavior while we are coming, that how we see the industry to perform in the near term or the future time. I would like to converge the whole conversation now, showing one research data again. And I'm again borrowing this chart from the IHS survey, IHS data, wherein the two growth trajectories being projected. So fast growth period was 2003 and up until 2011, as you can see, at a very strong CAGR of 16%, 14% used to be here. Then 11 through 19 was a kind of a growth, but with a subdued growth. So CAGR was 3%, growth to 7%, and then slightly declining in here as we are tipping in 2019 pre-COVID. Now we are in 19. From 19, it was projected to grow like this, what you see as a top graph. And now because COVID, we are likely to reset the industry. So this was the projection which was coming earlier when we were in the midst of the COVID crisis. But now industry is demonstrating quite a strong recovery, and we are, as long as the month-on-month is concerned, we are coming almost equal to the 2019 level. So there's two school of thought that we may be able to maintain midway somewhere in between, and this would be starting a new trajectory of the growth for the Indian automotive industry. So that is what I see that the future is lying. I don't see that this is lying in either of the way. The most likely, the future of the automotive in terms of the future growth are liking in between, and I see it much closer to the previous trajectory than the bottom one. With this, I would come on the last slide, and last slide I'm just trying to converge upon what industry expects from you, and now I'm talking specifically from students. So as you would have seen that I touched upon many of the elements ranging from the consumer behavior, the convergence, the technological transformations, so on and so forth. So what as a new graduates would be from you people and from the people who's coming to the industry a year down the line. So one of the key elements we got to learn is the risk management and liquidity management, and this would be more applicable not only for finance guys but also for everybody who is involved into managing one or other business vertical. Then the design and operate flexible business model. So this pandemic also teaches us that we got to be flexible, and therefore it is not only about our own internal flexibility, but the designing the business model which is flexible enough to cope up to any kind of turmoil situation. Automate and minimize need for manual processes. So automation, AI, these things will gain much more significance than ever. Learn new and emerging skills, like the new pandemic has taught us many skills, particularly in reaching customers, reaching people in a different way and different processes, but yet very effectively. Agility is extremely important in whatever we do here. And auto business is more than the vehicle, it is mobility, which is the key here. And I'm reinforcing on this point again in my conclusion here. And get emerging trend and adopt to it. And finally, ways to reach targeted customers are getting constantly redefined. So those who are coming from marketing and sales verticals would need to look into this perspective and refresh your case studies and learnings with the new examples which is coming out of this pandemic, because that would be the new learning which you will have to take into consideration. So with this, I'm concluding my session. I'd be happy to take any questions.
So we have one question from Aditi Singhal. How digital marketing is helping automobile industry in COVID times?
Okay, so Aditya, digital marketing has been immensely helpful. If you see the share of expenditure which automotive sector, or not only automotive, all other sectors has been doing. Usually the digital marketing commands for about 40% of the share of expenditure. If I talk about overall share of expenditure from marketing standpoint, 40 to 50%. But of late, in the last 1 quarter or almost last 6 months, digital medium is commanding the highest level of the share of the expenditure. Why so? Because of two reasons. One, you don't have any other choice to reach to customers. Most of the people are using or consuming the digital resources only. People are stuck to their houses. They can't go out. Therefore, you can't do the OH, you can't do the TV advertisement, you can't do, even newspapers are not being read in most of the cases unless the digital newspaper. So what people consume, people are staying at home. So one is that consumption of the digital content has grown exponentially. And at the same time, the ability of the marketeers has grown multiple fold with the new research and new tools coming in to be targeted, to have the targeted approach. Therefore, it is very important and very instrumental for people to get into digital marketing. And that is how the most of the industry experts are doing right nowadays.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there is another question that we already heard that the most of the spare parts were imported from China in the automobile sector. So, is there any learning that we should expand our importing base?
Well, importing depends upon several other factors. So it also depends upon what is the back-to-back integrations, what is the design and development facilities, what is the group which you belong to, how the overall integration is happening, which platform, so on and so forth. So as long as the automotive sector is concerned, it is not only limited to, it cannot be generalized. It depends upon how we are providing the overall ecosystem. And here a lot of role will come from the policymakers, from the government of India side. And at the same time, it will also be important that how competitive we become to compete into the global market. So that would be very, very instrumental from bringing in more domestic component industry. Good thing is that there's strong focus from government of India to bring the India as a hub of the component industry producers, but there's a long way to go on that, I would say.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable insights. I would request audience to post any questions if they have. So there is another question, that is there any discount factor still affecting the industry, and what actions companies are taking to stop it?
Well, organic discount is part of the industry. It's part of the game, right? So typically what happens when a new model year comes in, when I'm saying model year, I'm saying India follows a calendar year cycle. So some organic discounting process comes into picture as the vehicle gets into the festive season to stimulate the demand and to bring some urgencies. So discounts has got its own tactical role to do in the whole value chain system. That would exist, that has been existing in past, that would exist. Now, I touched upon some of the disrupted phases in the industry wherein the discount was much higher than what it is supposed to be. For example, like when you got to sell all the vehicle which is in the channel, and if a dealer knows that he won't be able to retail any more vehicle in the next month, he don't have a choice. He got to discount those vehicles. So those are the extraordinary situations. I believe those phases are gone. Now we are into much more stable phases, and those ill practices, I would not say ill practices, but those were the need of the hour, would not be dominant anymore.
Thank you, sir. Since we have all students from the management background, I would also like to know whether that there would be any impact on the employment also and the further job opportunities and recruiting side.
Well, as long as the current year is concerned, I would say there would be an impact because of the sheer reasons that the cash flows has been trying and companies are trying to adopt. But the good thing, and that happens for any of the, that's very obvious, right? You can anticipate that when the demand is not there for a couple of months, the industry will adopt, and therefore cost and the cost of operation will become very important. But what the students need to know, and which I touched upon in my 5 phases, if you see, the last phase is very important. The industry bounced back to 18% of the growth last month. And if we keep doing the right things, the industry is going to bounce back. We have got our fundamentals strong. Our economy is not only skewed, if you see the COVID thing, I understand that the industrial output was impacted severely. GDP is getting down as long as the quarter is concerned. But our economy is heavily dependent on the agriculture also, which was booming. The agriculture products are better. Monsoon is good. Okay, it has been good last year as well. So a good part of the industry is not as impacted as it is impacting the other side, the industrial sector. So the recovery would be much more faster. There could be some interim challenge, but as long as the medium term is concerned, I think we should be very, very positive about our outlook. Key thing is that we got to be relevant to the market. That is very important. So as long as we bring in the value on the table, we always have an option.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Sir, thank you so much. I would like to hand over to Isdev, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now that we are coming to the end of the lecture, thank you very much, sir, for your insights. The insights that you shared were certainly thought-provoking, and I guess you did a good research. And now we would want to learn more from your details, sir. If you can please share those with us, maybe that will be better for us, sir, because they were very good insights into this sector. We've been listening the news of this industry not doing well. now that you came up with so many factors that is affecting this industry and the ways that we can improve on this industry. It was a very informative session, sir, and certainly it will certainly help our students going towards the placements also. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us, sir.
Sure, it was indeed my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I will also thank our Professor Sudhir Pasricha, who helped us bring you on board, sir. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for participants for joining us. And on behalf of entire Amity Education Group team, our director, Dr. Girish Kuparia, I would like to extend our thank you to you, sir, for being part of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Sir.
Okay, bye.